It's the 18th of April, 1955. Albert Einstein is in his office at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Princeton, New Jersey. Out of nowhere, he starts suffering from excruciating pain in his stomach. He calls his secretary, Helen Dukas, who immediately rushes him to Princeton Hospital. A few hours later, Albert Einstein took his final breath. The news made headlines all over the world, but what was even more shocking was a journalist's discovery. A discovery indicating that Einstein's brain was actually stolen the night he died, an information that was kept a secret for decades after his passing. How was this even possible? Who stole Einstein's brain? And most importantly, for what reason? Albert Einstein was born on March 14, 1879, in Germany. He had a childhood marked by both brilliance and challenges. Raised in a secular Jewish family, he often struggled with speech, not uttering a word until he was 4 years old. This delay led to concerns about his development, but it was soon clear that his mind was a treasure full of ideas. In 1901, he moved to Switzerland, seeking a fresh start. But it was in 1933, amidst the rise of the Nazis, that he fled to the United States, where he would become an intellectual icon. Settling in Princeton, New Jersey, he took on a role at the Institute for Advanced Studies. But his life was not without its shadows. For nearly 4 decades, Einstein battled chronic illnesses, primarily digestive disorders, liver ailments, and stomach pains. In 1948, he managed to escape death thanks to a weird operation done by Dr. Rudolf Nissen when he wrapped Einstein's aortic aneurysm with cellophane, triggering a body reaction that miraculously prevented a rupture. After a long, painful recovery, Einstein told family and friends that he won't be undergoing any more surgeries in the future, and if fatal complications come his way, he won't fight them. And that's exactly what happened with his death. Despite international recognition of his work, Einstein hated all the fame and attention that came with it. He just wanted to be left alone to think and work on his theories. In his will, he requested that his body wouldn't be studied, rather cremated and his ashes scattered in secret. But unfortunately, his wish was never honored, because on the night he died, someone flat out stole his brain. And this is how it went down. Einstein's death surprised his family. He appeared to be in pretty good health up until the day before, when he was suddenly hit with some intense stomach pains. Although he'd had history with such pains, he'd been okay for a good amount of time. The reason that pushed his loved ones to know the nature of the sudden complication that took him down. So they asked the hospital to perform an autopsy. It's the morning of April 18, 1955. Albert Einstein is lying dead on the autopsy table. The doctor performing the autopsy knew exactly where to start. As he's examining his stomach organs, he finds a huge amount of blood in Einstein's abdomen. This area is very important due to the fact it holds vital organs like the liver and pancreas. The doctor knew right away that Einstein had a ruptured aneurysm. That means a blood vessel in his belly burst and caused fatal internal bleeding. The causes of death are now established. There's no need to investigate further. Dr. Thomas Harvey is done. He instructs his 2 assistants to put the body back in proper condition and leaves to his office to write the report. This is when the story takes a dark turn. Dr. Harvey is writing the report. Death due to internal bleeding is quite common. Nothing extraordinary about the incident. Harvey had been a big fan of Einstein for years. The practitioner puts down the report and asks his assistants to leave. Both didn't think much of it, as sometimes pathologists may ask for a moment alone with a corpse to pay their respects. But Harvey didn't ask to be alone with dead Einstein to pay his respects. He had other plans in mind. He absolutely wants to know where the scientist got his intelligence from. What does a genius's brain even look like, and what's so uniquely different about it? Harvey doesn't hesitate for a second. He shaves Albert's head in silence, carefully opens up the skull, and removes the gray matter. All of this, of course, without any permission. He wasn't afraid of the consequences that could reach jail time. After all, Einstein's body wasn't to be displayed publicly or privately. The body is going to be cremated, and the scientist's ashes will be scattered in some unknown location. Then, Harvey cautiously places the brain into a jar, and without drawing attention, he carries it to a lab at the University of Pennsylvania. Here, he'll be studying the brain and come up with an unexpected discovery. It's now a couple of days after Einstein's autopsy. He was cremated and no one took notice. Harvey now has all the time in the world to satisfy his curiosities. Convinced that this brain is noticeably heavier than average, Dr. Harvey starts by weighing it. For an ordinary man, the brain weighs on average 1,350 grams. Einstein's must definitely be much heavier. He places the organ on the scale, but it only weighed 1,230 grams, even lighter than average. Harvey can't believe it. He concludes that intelligence cannot be measured by the size or the weight of the human brain. But if it's not size, where does it come from? Harvey's next test includes convolutions. The convolutions are the winding folds of the cerebral cortex. These are characterized by the significantly deeper grooves that clearly outline the surface of the brain. The doctor photographs them from every possible angle. Maybe that's where Albert Einstein's genius is hidden. He carefully slices the brain into 240 small cubes. This allows better viewing under the microscope. He goes through the same process hundreds of times. He even took a microscope home and continued his experiments in his basement. Months into this, and hundreds of notes later, Harvey decides to wrap things up but never releases any of his research findings. He disappears without leaving an address with his jars and their precious contents, at least for now. Dr. Harvey went on to stay off radars for almost 2 decades until American journalist Stephen Levy decided to go find him back in the early 70s. And in the year 1978, he finally manages to track him down in Wichita, Kansas. Stephen Levy pays a visit to Harvey's home. He knocks on the door, and soon enough, Harvey opens. Bizarrely, he agrees to speak to the journalist. Stephen doesn't beat around the bush. He wants to know if the doctor really has Einstein's brain. Harvey first says no, but then he changes his mind and takes the journalist to a little storage room in the back of the house. He pulls out a box labeled Costa Ciders. Inside, there are jars with something floating in liquid. "I guess this is what you're here for," Harvey says. Following this encounter, Stephen Levy comes out with a detailed article that catches the media's eye regarding Thomas Harvey's discoveries. He mentions that the doctor didn't discover anything out of the ordinary in the brain of the greatest genius of the 20th century at all. It turned out to be completely normal. But the story isn't quite over yet. It took an unexpected turn in 1982. Harvey ultimately decides to distribute some of his treasure among his colleagues. He sends histological slides and photographs of the brain to 18 prominent researchers. This results in 6 major publications that ultimately reveal that Albert Einstein did have a different brain from the rest of us. His anatomy typically shows no difference, except when it comes to the parietal lobes. They are larger than what's considered normal, a particularity that has already been observed in other great physicists and mathematicians. Although such research is arguably beneficial to the scientific community, what's sad is that Albert Einstein never agreed to what had happened. At the end, Dr. Thomas Harvey never got into any trouble, and Einstein's family never gave an official response to the story. Subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.